Tonight on The Wrap, Donald Trump threatens to bomb Oman. Yes, that's Oman, not Iran. The president's extraordinary tirade against a friendly country came as the 60-day ceasefire runs out, raising fears of renewed fighting and disruption to global oil supplies. The Chancellor of Cambridge University criticises what he calls a racist feeding frenzy around Jason Arde, the former professor who died on Friday. Thousands of people turned out this evening for a vigil in Trafalgar Square. Also ahead, outrageously reckless behaviour, says Ireland's Justice Minister, deliberately driving the wrong way down the motorway and filming it for social media likes. 5 teenagers are dead and a 7-year-old boy is among 4 seriously injured in hospital. And breaking news this evening, FIFA sacks one of its most senior figures after he criticised Gianni Infantino's plan to put the World Cup up for sale. We discuss the day's biggest stories with the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the political commentator Adam Boulton. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's papers. We'll do that in half an hour. Hello there, a very good evening. If it gets in the way, we'll bomb the S out of them. That was Donald Trump's blunt message to Oman, in more industrial language, of course, than we're allowed to use on television. The Gulf state has traditionally been seen as a US ally. Well, Jenny and Adam, what do you make of this? No swearing, Adam?
Well, I mean, we've known for a long time that Donald Trump is a menace. He says warmer things about traditional enemies like North Korea, and in this case Oman, than he does about traditional opponents like North Korea, and also about Iran. So, worth remembering too, there are significant numbers of British troops located in Oman, as there have been. There's a big training base there. Is he going to bomb the crap out of them?
Good point, Jenny.
I would say his spicy language indicates his just utter frustration and his awareness of his complete failure in foreign policy in the Middle East. He is aware of how much this is a strategic defeat in Iran and how much Iran now knows how to exploit America's weaknesses. So this is just a sign of how angry and frustrated he is. Yeah,
we'll discuss more in a moment. The US president's comments come as the 60-day ceasefire with Iran runs out. He said this evening that he is not looking to extend the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran and repeated his threat against Oman, albeit in more measured terms.
This morning you said you would bomb the S out of Oman if they got in the way of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Would you say you're out of patience with Oman, a strategic partner?
No, I don't think they behave very well, but we'd handle them very easily, just like we do others.
Let's bring in our US correspondent, James Matthews, who's in Washington for us. James, as Jenny was saying there, perhaps a sign of the frustration that's being felt in the White House, this tirade.
Yeah, and I think Jenny is right. This sense of hopelessness that I suspect Donald Trump himself shares. Oman is a long-time ally of the United States, strategic partner at a time when he needs all the friends he can get, particularly ones that can bring this or help him to bring it to some kind of suitable conclusion. I suspect his problem and frustration, fear certainly, would be that Oman and Iran, they are talking about solutions to the Strait of Hormuz. He will sense a carve-up that might potentially carve him out of any long-term deal, and that will trouble Donald Trump on a financial basis, but also clearly on a political basis too, at a time when there is no solution in sight. I was speaking to somebody, congressman today, happened to be a Democrat. He said the problem with Trump is that he has one plan. This art of the deal, it's all a nonsense. He's a guy who walks into a room, kicks the other guy in the balls, and if that guy doesn't back down, Donald Trump has nowhere to go. He says this is exactly the template of the Iranian issue. That's what is causing him the difficulty. The Iranians aren't backing down. So in terms of where it goes from here, Trump has no control over it. And that prompts the kind of frustration that he's been articulating today.
The language being used tonight, it's not even 10:05. James, for the moment, thank you very much. Jenny, this 60-day peace plan between Iran and the US has expired, but we're no further forward, are we, to finding a resolution? It's perhaps not surprising that people are using bad language.
Yes, but it's also the case that this has been a fantastic own goal by the US, who have demonstrated to Iran the power that they have, how they can exploit American weaknesses through taking control of the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran, as Donald Trump said so appallingly when he was meeting the Ukrainian president for the first time in the White House, you don't have any cards, you have none of the cards. Well, Iran now has cards and knows that it can play them really, really well. And it's very, very infuriating, I'm sure, for Donald Trump, who is used to being able to bully his own way out of anything. And this is not something that he can bully his way out of. And this disdain he has for all of his allies in South Korea, in Oman, in Europe, his NATO allies, and the way that he feels that he can punish people, punish countries for not supporting his war in Iran without realising that this lack of support is indicative of the fact that the war was not a very good idea. He just doesn't learn lessons like that. So now he's like a kind of toddler throwing a tantrum because he realises the limits of his power. And all Iran has to do is just wait it out.
There is a complete lack of diplomacy, isn't it, given the US's long history with Oman and the fact that Oman is actually trying to help?
Well, yeah, I mean, Oman is very important, and in a sense, Oman has also been energised in this conflict, because before the attack on Iran by America and Israel, Iran and Oman were on either side of the Straits of Hormuz. The Musandam part of Oman is the spike going out. And they were just accepting that there was freedom of navigation through the Straits of Hormuz. Now that Trump has caused this war and the Iranians have reacted by saying, we have a choke on this, not surprisingly, the Omanis have said, well, so do we. And we believe that they were talking about a kind of two-way system, that people would go in to the Straits of Hormuz on the Iranian side, and then they would come out on the Omani side, which might be a sensible solution, although, of course, it does raise the possibility of charging for passage, although probably not the amount that Trump was talking about. But, he's been excluded, or feels excluded, in a problem that, he created. And what we've heard from him twice today on the subject of sending out a tweet saying we shouldn't be participating in the joint military exercise with South Korea, is that when allies don't help him out, as he sees it, come to his aid over Iran. I mean, why South Korea should get involved in Iran is beyond me. But he says, well, they didn't come to our aid, so, why should I help them, even though I've got 30,000 troops stationed in South Korea. Similarly, he's making the same charge against Oman. They're not helping me, therefore I'm going to bomb them. I mean, it is, it is truly, it's pathetic, and it's also pathetic because you no longer believe it.
Yeah, but his politics has always been the politics of naked self-interest.
Yeah.
And so none of this should come as any surprise. Equally, we shouldn't be surprised that he's using this kind of language, even to talk about his allies. But then there is this question of, what does getting in the way mean? What does this threat mean? If Oman gets in the way of his plans for the Straits of Hormuz, as you say, it's their strait as much as it's Iran. So what constitutes getting in the way?
It's not as if his negotiations are going any better.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and worth bearing in mind, you talk about diplomacy.
Yeah.
We've had Jared Kushner out trying to sort out the other issue, which appears to be going anywhere, which is the border police plans for Gaza and the settlement there, met with Hamas. I mean, who would have thought that senior American representative would be meeting with Hamas along with Tony Blair? That's something that was unthinkable in any previous administration. Then goes to Israel. Not clear whether he's even seen Netanyahu. He's seen other ministers. There have been hours of talks. And while he's been there, a member of the government has been saying what we need to do is to shoot a few dozen Gazans every day just for the sake of it. They're not even human beings. And America, you know, doesn't support that, but seemingly unable to say that because it's...
unable to condemn it.
Condemn it, you know, because it's caught up in you know, these meaningless negotiations. Again, negotiations started by Donald Trump, and as you were saying, there was meant to be a 60-day deadline. There was meant to be a deadline to do with the process for Gaza, but by the time the deadline's reached, it's already such a dead duck that people barely notice.
We're going to move on. That story, by the way, does feature on the front of the Metro. Their headline is, "That doesn't sound much like peace, Mr. President." We'll have a full rundown, of course, of what's in the rest of the papers at past. But we have got some breaking news coming into us here at Sky. In the last few minutes, the Russian embassy to the UK has published this statement saying reports that the Kyiv regime is using British drones to carry out strikes deep inside Russian territory confirm that London is deliberately opting for an escalation of the Ukraine crisis while hypocritically professing a desire for peace. In doing so, the United Kingdom is acting as an accomplice and co-perpetrator of the bloody crimes and terrorist attacks committed by the Ukrainian neo-Nazis seeking to contain Russia and inflict maximum damage on it by proxy. London's actions, the statement continues, will inevitably carry consequences for which it will have to answer. The deeper its involvement in the conflict and the greater its support for Kyiv's terrorist machinery, the higher the price it will pay. That statement from the Russian embassy to the UK a little earlier. Jenny, it's strongly worded. This follows, of course, reports in the press over the weekend that British parts were being used in drones, which are now going further and further into Russia. We saw Russia's equivalent of Amazon, Wildberries warehouses hit again in the last few days, and that, of course, meant repercussions for Ukraine. But that is quite a statement.
It is, and it's this idea that Russia is holding the UK complicit and accountable for the attacks on their soil. You know, the risks of this escalating are real. But we know also that Russia does like to make statements like this. There's quite a lot of brinkmanship in their rhetoric. The problem is that sometimes you do need to listen to what they're saying. So, you know, it's something we should take seriously.
It's rather more literate than Donald Trump, but it sounds like a Donald Trump statement, frankly. You know, the reality is successive governments in this country have given solid support to Ukraine. Ukraine is now clearly inflicting damage on Russia. It's very uncomfortable. The popularity of Putin, although he'll win the next election, but is clearly under pressure in Russia. People are now talking on the streets saying, you know, there are petrol shortages, we don't like this. And this is, you know, in the teeth of actually being on the losing end of things, trying to fight back. And of course, worth remembering, you know, Russia is already attacking this country. You know, we've had the Skripals, we've had the Litvinenko poisoning, we have, according to official sources, daily cyber attacks on the UK. We've had the boarding of ghost ships by British and French forces, to which the Russians said, well, OK, if you're going to board our ghost ships, i.e. not officially our ships, but rather admitting that they were theirs, we'll start thinking about boarding yours. I mean, we're already there, frankly.
Yeah. OK, we will keep across that story, of course, throughout the evening here on Sky News. Moving on, the Chancellor of Cambridge University, Lord Smith, has criticised what he calls a racist feeding frenzy around Jason Arday. The former professor died on Friday after a row over plagiarism. Thousands of people turned out this evening for a vigil in Trafalgar Square. Barnaby Papadopoulos was there.
They came together in their grief and in their anger.
Person in the middle of this awful storm.
Thousands of people gathered in London's Trafalgar Square to remember Professor Jason Arday, to mourn his passing and demand answers.
I used to teach Jason Arday, and he was a kind soul. It's appalling what's happened to him, and I feel if I don't do anything, then I'm supporting it.
I feel incredibly sad, and I can't do anything else because he was obviously a decent person and he's been very badly treated.
The Cambridge University professor died last week at the age of 41. In the weeks before his death, he was subject to scrutiny over allegations that he'd fabricated parts of his personal life and plagiarised work. He denied the allegations and resigned shortly before his death, saying that his resignation should in no way be seen as an acceptance of the narrative that surrounded him. A statement by his family, read out by his local Labour MP, described the attention he'd received as a cruelty that had been too much to bear.
We are grateful to all who have created light in this dark time through kindness, generosity, and solidarity. Your presence here to remember him this evening means a lot to us. And while we cannot be there in person, please know that we stand with you in spirit. The public cruelty Jason was subjected to was too much for any man to bear.
Thousands have called for a public inquiry, adding their names to a petition which claims racism was at the heart of the treatment Professor Ardé received. Criticism has been levelled too at the University of Cambridge, with questions being asked about his appointment and the university's duty of care towards him. The university have previously defended their mental health support for Ardé. This had been described as a vigil and not a protest. But there was a lot of anger, much of it directed at the British media. That anger comes from those who don't just want to mourn, but to demand change too. Barnaby Papadopoulos, Sky News.
Adam and Jenny still with me in the studio. Jenny, well over 1,000 people then at that vigil. And many of them do believe the scrutiny into Jason Ardé got well and truly out of hand and was fuelled by racism.
This is an unbelievably sad story, and it's a complex story, and it doesn't become more simple because Jason Ardé died on Friday. I do think some of this is to do with racism. I think a lot of this, really tragically, is to do with the fact that this story came out in August. There weren't a lot of other stories around. It wasn't just newspapers publishing a lot of stories about him. It was also social media algorithms pushing. I mean, my feeds were absolutely full of stories about him. And there are a lot of people who found it fun to follow this story. There was a kind of vindictive glee in pursuing this story, which was out of proportion with what...
and made money.
Made money with clicks. But there is also the case that Jason Ardé wasn't perfect. There are questions about his PhD that were put to rest by the awarding department at Liverpool, John Moores, that they said they're happy with it. But there are other questions about his ability to be elastic with the truth about various things to do with his sporting achievements and his fundraising, all sorts of questions. He has a book coming out. He still has this book coming out, which is part of the reason why all of this was being discussed. And Jason Ardé, you know, he used, at the time, there were people asking legitimate questions about plagiarism, you know, specialist journalists from the Times Education Supplement, and he used lawyers and also the police to try and stop those inquiries. So whilst I think there's certainly racism at play in that there are a group of people for whom a successful black person where there might be doubts about their credentials, that is manna from heaven to be able to say that any person of colour who achieves greatness is only there because of some DEI false sense of over-promoting people. But there is also the fact that even though there were legitimate questions to be asked, there was too much coverage because of the time of year, sadly, that this fell, and because of the appetite for this story online.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, that, Adam. Do you agree with that? Because the story did seem to explode in a way that perhaps didn't justify it for a number of reasons. And Jenny's also right, isn't she, in saying that it is a complex story, and there are many people who've tried to perhaps simplify the situation to, underline their own beliefs.
Yeah, I think we all know that where a story falls in the news agenda can affect how big it is. You know, if there isn't other things competing for news attention, then they can get amplified out of proportion. That may well have happened on this occasion. That said, it was a fascinating story in as much as Jason Ardé was referred to by Cambridge as a poster boy. He was someone who was apparently, I've never heard of it before, offered 2 professorships. You know, which one would you fancy? Because they were so anxious to have him on board. And whatever the motives of the people who have turned up evidence both about his biography and his the plagiarism, you know, people will make their own judgment. It's been published, the text, the 2 texts, his text and the other text, which wasn't acknowledged. And as far as I can see, none of those charges have been, you know, refuted in that sense, about the distortions. Now, you may say he got too much scrutiny, but the substance of it does not seem to have been recruited. There's also, I think, the most telling point that I've heard on this is the Cambridge professor I interviewed at the weekend, Sir Simon Baron-Cohen. He says that on 2 days before, or a number of days before Jason Arde was found dead, he put out on social media that he was an autistic person and that suicide was something that is more common with autistic people. And I don't think anyone noted that, because the bulk of the articles were published around the time of his death and before his death. And perhaps, you know, we should have noted that. I mean, there is an argument saying that, you know, once he resigned, that, you know, he should have been left alone. Yeah. And he clearly wasn't by the media, because there was more publication afterwards than before. But that said, you know, nobody was seeking to, quotes, hound him to his death. That was not the intention of anybody who was publishing these stories. And I think, you know, the mood of that demonstration was pretty much saying that's what went on. He was handed to his death. He was not handed to his death. He may have been subjected to undue pressure. He was autistic, but they shouldn't have done it. But the notion that anyone was seeking him to kill himself, I just think is wrong.
Well, I think people did forget that he was a real person who wasn't necessarily a public figure. Yes, he edited the Today programme, and yes, he was presented as a poster boy for Cambridge University. That doesn't mean that he was used to public scrutiny. And I think people didn't see him as the people who were enjoying, with real vindictive glee, the coverage. I don't think they saw him as a fully formed person who would be affected by all of this. But, you know, it's one of these things. I hope that it will give editors pause.
Do you think the university then? The university's got questions to answer.
Oh, they have so many questions to answer.
For putting him in that position.
For putting him in that position, for their duty of care after he resigned. I mean, there are all these people saying that he was in a very fragile state. Well, why wasn't somebody with him all of the time? Well, all of his questions will emerge. But there's Cambridge certainly has questions to answer. In all of these cases, you know, what people in these positions need, or what Jason Arde, what he would have thrived on, is if he had critical friends who were looking after him and anticipating questions that might arise from people who do wish him ill, people who are racist and are actively looking for this stuff, rather than just people who are totally, you know, sycophantic. And I think there was far too much, there wasn't a willingness to ask any questions, when actually asking questions would have been in his best interest.
Yeah. I mean, there are a great deal of questions to answer, because at the moment we heard demands there for a public inquiry. I personally can't quite see what you could have a public inquiry into. But Cambridge University has said that it is going to investigate this case, which indeed appears to have been the spur to the resignation by Jason Arde as a professor. And it's going to be very, very difficult for Cambridge to, you know, examine themselves, and presumably they're going to have to decide how much they want to make public about this, because, you know, an internal investigation is not necessarily published. As far as the activities of the media are concerned, you know, there is the independent IPSO, the independent press watchdog, and watchdogs, and I would suggest, rather than having a public inquiry, if people have got complaints, they should make complaints to that. And
Jason Arday did make complaints about the press. I would say that with Cambridge, though, their investigation is into his appointment and the circumstances around his appointment. It's not. I don't know if they're going to broaden it out to look at the duty of care.
They did issue a statement, didn't they, saying that they did offer support to him. But we take your point. OK, listen. We're out of time, Adam. We're going to have to leave it there. Sorry. And of course, if you have been affected by that story, you can contact the Samaritans on 116 123 or go to samaritans.org. Now, it looks like a red card with no VAR review. FIFA has sacked one of its most senior executives after he criticised Gianni Infantino's plan to sell off the World Cup. In a statement, a spokesperson said the following: FIFA can confirm that the working relationship between FIFA and Kevin Lamore as FIFA's Chief Operating Officer has ended on the 17th of August 2026. FIFA thanks Kevin for his 2 years of service and wishes him the best of luck for the future. Our sports correspondent is here in the studio with me, Rob Harris. Rob, are we 4 weeks in now since this scandal broke and another twist?
Yes, just when we thought it might have been going quiet, the man who spoke out 2.5 weeks ago, Kevin Lamore, daring FIFA to sack him, well, that has now happened. Very carefully worded statement there from FIFA, but Sky News understands Kevin Lamore, the Chief Operating Officer at FIFA, has been sacked for going public and talking about being deceived by Gianni Infantino, the staff, over the attempt to try and sell shares in the World Cup to private investors. He actually also said that the time has come now for political leaders in football to ask themselves the right questions and make the right decisions, talking about the staff deserving better than contempt and intimidation. So this was really damning about not just the whole controversial plan, but also Gianni Infantino's leadership. And Kevin Lamore, someone who's known Infantino for many years. He was with him at UEFA when Infantino was General Secretary, brought over to FIFA by him 2 years ago. So worked so closely alongside him, yet being kept in the dark really stung. And this has just intensified things just when it might have seemed to be calming a bit.
Yeah, it really has. Rob, for the moment, thank you very much. Do stay with us. Coming up next, we'll take a first look at what is making the front pages of Tuesday's papers. Don't go away.
jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hello again, welcome back. You're watching The Wrap. Let's see then what is making the front pages of tomorrow's papers. Following Donald Trump's expletive-laden threat to bomb Oman, a US ally, if it doesn't go along with his plan to end the war in Iran. Metro declares that doesn't sound much like peace, Mr. President. The Guardian reports that Reform UK's deputy leader Richard Tice has been criticised for suggesting that people should get more accustomed to enjoying extreme heat rather than worrying about its effects or the impact of climate change. The Mirror picks up on that story as well, in particular Mr Tice's comments about how the heat could be good for Britain's sparkling wine market. Now, according to TDI, fire chiefs have warned the public not to ring 999 to report neighbours having barbecues or bonfires because it could overwhelm the system. The Express carries claims that migrant camps like those seen in Calais could soon be established on Britain's south coast. The Times reports that British children are becoming intoxicated with extremism through the content they're exposed to on social media. Here's your FT for tomorrow, saying the accounting firm KPMG and EY have been awarded a contract worth nearly £500 million to train civil servants. Andy Burnham is the subject of mockery in The Star as it's emerged he briefly exchanged messages with a prankster claiming to be Donald Trump's chief of staff, while the Mail demands to know the identity of the culprit. And The Sun has a story concerning former Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola's divorce. Jenny and Adam are here with me. It's not very often we start with the Daily Star, but why don't we? It's August. Let's have some fun. Andy's faked, caught out by Trump prankster and crazy wildfire alert. Does somebody need to take away the Prime Minister's phone? The picture there of Andy Burnham on the phone. Just explain this story to us, Jenny.
It emerged this morning that the Prime Minister had been having some text communication with someone he thought was Susie Wiles, who is Donald Trump's chief of staff, very most senior aide, but it turned out they were not. And we don't know very many details about this. Downing Street said they don't answer questions of national security, but we know that the Prime Minister got a bit sus after a few of these messages and realised that it was a prank, but it may not have been a prank. We don't know. It could have been a prank. It could have been a foreign interests from a hostile state trying to see how they could get to the Prime Minister. We don't know how they got the Prime Minister's number. We don't know how long they were communicating and whether or not his phone was compromised in any of these communications. So it's an interesting story with a kind of serious side, although, you know, no matter what, it is embarrassing for Number 10 that something like this can happen.
Yeah, same story on the front of the Daily Mail. So who was White House hoaxer who duped PM? I mean, he's not the first Prime Minister, and he won't be the last, will he, who's been duped in a similar way? No,
Absolutely not. I mean, Tony Blair had someone claiming to be William Hague put through to him, and it turned out to be the impersonator Culshaw who was doing it. And I think Rory Bremner did not necessarily on a Prime Minister, but he certainly did some prank calls in his time and recorded them. I mean, it is the modern world. You can't really say take away his phone. Because people do communicate so much on phones. Well, one Prime Minister famously didn't have a phone, isn't that right? Or didn't use a phone? Was it? Well, there was a big row. I think Gordon Brown, possibly. Gordon Brown. He'd just like throwing them at the wall. You know, there was a big fuss. I remember when Barack Obama came in in 2008 because he shocked the then Secret Service by saying he wanted to keep his BlackBerry. Which was a way
that's going back
used to communicating. And in the end, they invented a super secure BlackBerry for the president. But now, you know, the fact is everyone uses phones. Andy Burnham's phone number was in fairly wide circulation when he was mayor. I don't know whether he's changed his number or not. and he spotted it, so it looks like no harm done. I do think there is one serious thing about this, though, which is that certainly I think all people in government shouldn't be allowed to have the delete thing, that their messages are deleted after a certain time.
Disappearing messages.
I think it's a matter of record, and you shouldn't be allowed to have disappearing messages. This came up, of course, during the various inquiries into COVID. But as far as I know, there has not been an instruction yet issued saying you can't have disappearing messages.
No, that's very interesting. And of course, President Trump quite happily hands out his phone number, doesn't he, to journalists, including our very own Mark Stone, who gives him a bell from time to time. Let's move on then and have a look at the front of the Times. Tweak to early release scheme could keep PC's killers in prison. Jenny, this is a story that's been around for quite a few days now and has really got the public sort of angry and furious, hasn't it?
So there's two of the three people convicted of killing PC Andrew Harper were set to be released according to this early release scheme, which is due to come into force. And he, as a victim, has become the kind of figurehead for the injustice that will occur should this early release scheme go ahead. And so a lot of political capital has been spent trying to find a way to keep two of his killers in prison. So these are the two people who were in the car but not driving the car, who were convicted of a lesser offence than the person who was driving the car. And according to this, the government is looking at exempting all those who committed unlawful act manslaughter, which is the specific kind of manslaughter that these two men were convicted of, making those people exempt from the early release scheme. And in some respects, I think if I was a victim of crime, I probably would find it quite, in one respect, infuriating that there is so much tinkering going on with this particular case, because it has become symbolic of the injustice of the early release scheme. But then again, I also feel for the police, because here is somebody trying to bring people to justice, and how are the police meant to feel that they can continue with their jobs when they know that if they arrest people, they might be convicted, but then those people might be set free? So I can understand why there is outrage, not only because of the nature of the crime against PC Harper, but also about what it means for the police force in general. But it does seem to be remarkable that that so much is being done just to make this one particular case work.
Well, we've heard from the Ministry of Justice, actually, in the last few minutes. Let me just read to you a little bit of their statement. Public safety will always be our priority. We're fast-tracking a plan to keep more of the most serious offenders behind bars, on top of murderers, anyone on life sentences, and those in prison for rape, serious child sexual abuse and grooming offences who are already blocked from any changes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do this, they're doing this in the right way. I mean, this is not a direct intervention on an individual case, although that's clearly what's inspired it. They have found a class of prisoners, as you say, people who committed manslaughter in the course of an unlawful act, i.e. committing another crime, which is what the judge said. So presumably, there'll be, I don't know, a dozen more other people who were due for early release who now won't get it because they also fall into that category. I can't believe that these two are the only ones who fall into that category. And if they are, I think it's wrong, because I think justice should be a matter of principle and rule rather than individual cases. And it certainly shouldn't be a matter in which there's direct interference by government. And so, my feeling about all of this is that if the government takes a decision that it's going to release people and people fall into that category, then they should be released. But what we've seen is Andy Burnham responding to public opinion, first of all on the question of sexual crime, and now on this committing manslaughter in the course of an unlawful act. But it does mean that the basic issue, which was clearing up spaces in prisons, is going to get harder because there are going to be more people kept inside.
Of course, yeah, of course. OK, let's move on to... Where were you, Adam, when your phone went off with that alert? Did yours go off?
Yeah, it did go off.
Do you remember where you were?
Yeah, I can remember when I was at home. I just looked at it and I thought, oh, that's it. I didn't read any further.
Jenny?
I was in France, so I didn't get it.
Oh, you didn't get it? No. I was on air. I was in the TV studio and the thing went off as I was reading the news. It's been controversial, hasn't it? Front of the eye, neighbours told don't phone 999 to report next door's barbecue. Apparently, the number of people making calls has rocketed, putting the fire service under even more stress.
I mean, the illegal stuff that goes on in people's gardens, if it's not hose pipes, it's barbecues. There's a lot to look over your fence at. If you're that kind of person that likes reporting on your neighbours, I mean, it's so depressing to think people actually do this. They actually dial 999 to report their neighbours having a barbecue, but I'm sure it happens. That's the world that we live in. The question about the alert is interesting, though, because there's a lot of people saying that... I mean, I was thinking about the BBC News alert app, on the app, and how it's just been completely devalued because you just get alerts about everything, that it has to be used with such judicious caution. And then there are lots of other people saying that it's put people at risk. They should warn people. There are victims of domestic violence who have secret phones that are hidden, those phones have been exposed because all of a sudden their phone is making a giant noise. You know, it is something that you have to use with real care. That it is something that should really jolt you out of what you're doing and make you think, OK, there is an imminent threat. And I know that the government was saying that they're responding to a request from the fire service, but it's the job of people in government to make decisions and decide whether or not those requests are legitimate ones. They don't just carry out what
I interviewed the former minister who brought this in, you know, and they tested it and experimented with it. And he was saying that this sort of blanket use across the whole of England and Wales actually isn't what it was designed for. It was designed to localise, and you can have a very small area, you know, where you can send an alert to just a small number of phones when there is a real sense of danger and people need to take immediate action. And this feels like it wasn't quite the right...
Well, exactly. I mean, it was an alert telling you it was hot, which you probably knew. You know, I would say that, you know, people shouldn't be phoning out the police. They should be phoning out ambulances, because anyone in this hot weather who's having a barbecue or a bonfire needs their brains tested.
I can't even get those disposable barbecues to light, even if I had one.
You'd be breaking the law if you did it.
I can't get the coals to get hot.
I think you probably could today.
Thank you both very much for the moment. Now, Andy Burnham is facing a test. Will he choose to burn his green credentials or jobs in the North Sea? Our business correspondent Paul Kelso explains.
Aberdeen is the heart of the UK's energy industry, and out there, 2 oil and gas fields at the centre of fundamental questions about our use of fossil fuels, the pace and price of the energy transition, and the cost of making the wrong choice in a climate crisis. Rosebank is an oil and gas field capable, say its developers, of producing 10% of future North Sea crude output. Jackdaw is a gas field to the east that could start powering up to 1.4 million homes within months. Both would have been supplying UK homes and businesses already, but for a legal challenge last year. With plans resubmitted and a public consultation now closed, their developer, a joint venture between energy giants Shell and Norway's Equinor, want the green light.
The impact is insignificant in global terms, in terms of the environment. The difference with Jackdaw and Rosebank is the tax is paid here, the jobs are paid here, the apprentices are employed here, and the supply chain is supported here. And that's what we want everyone to focus on.
Saying yes to Rosebank and Jackdaw would appear to breach the spirit, if not the letter, of Labour's manifesto commitment to ban new North Sea drilling. And it is the case that the oil and gas pumped from Rosebank and Jackdaw and traded on global markets will not cut energy bills and have only a marginal impact on our energy independence. We will still need imports. But it's also true that even with the most rapid transition to renewables, and the UK's has been among the quickest in Europe, we will rely on gas in particular for decades to underpin a grid based on intermittent sun and wind power. So does it not make sense to use what we have on our doorstep with the benefits to jobs, local economies and tax revenue, rather than relying on imports in an uncertain world and effectively exporting our emissions? In a parched and scorching summer that's brought the reality of a changing climate to every corner of the UK, including the Cairngorms 50 miles from Aberdeen, many believe that would be a betrayal.
No one's saying turn off the taps today or even turn off the taps next week. There's already a huge amount of oil and gas consented in the North Sea coming on shore to the UK. The reality is, if we want security of supply and we want to be able to create jobs, protect jobs and tackle climate change, then we need to more rapidly get off of the fossil fuel addiction that we have now.
The final decision rests with Andy Burnham and new Energy Secretary Miatta Fahnbulleh. And it will tell us much about the new government's balance between pragmatism and principle. And it will not be the last as we transition from an economy built on undersea riches to one based on wind and solar power above the waves.
Paul Kelso reporting. Let's get the thoughts of Jenny and Adam. Adam's still sending a text, so I'll come to you first, Jenny. Which way do you think the government will go on this? Because opening them would be against the spirit of the Labour manifesto, wouldn't it? To ban new drilling.
I think it would be a very big deal for the Labour government to go ahead with it.
Yeah.
But, this is a difficult situation where you've got economic interests colliding with environmental interests and energy policy, all of it all in one, and at the worst time that it possibly could have. After we've said we've had 5 heat waves this summer. Maybe we should just call this summer rather than just successive heat waves. It would be, I think, Andy Burnham is very keen to please everybody, and he's popular with the backbenchers, and I think that this would be a kind of really bitter pill for them to swallow if this was something that he wanted to go ahead.
Is it some sort of compromise where he opens them and then any revenue goes to sort of deprived parts of the country? Or, there might be a way of sweetening the pill, mightn't there?
Yeah, I wasn't actually sending a text.
Sorry, Adam.
I was looking up the process and...
doing journalism.
Even once we get this report back, it's not just a question of Andy Burnham saying thumbs up or thumbs down.
Right.
What happens is... the government and the regulators have to present their case, and then it is a decision for the Secretary of State, which is Miatta Fahnbulleh now, who's taken over, and then there can possibly be further legal challenges. So I think it would require a strong indication by Andy Burnham that he supports this and he thinks it should now go ahead. To really speed the process forward, but it's not really going to be him. We don't really know where Miatta Fahnbulleh, who's very concerned with the economy, where she's going to go on this. My personal view is that given that Andy Burnham has opened this up again, said that he's open-minded, he's pragmatic, given that that is a position which the major unions, Unite and the GMB, support, and given the fact that this is a limited extension of the North Sea, it's not new licences, that he would be well advised to give his support to opening this up. Because at the very least, this will generate economic activity and employment in the UK. And frankly, it will not make any difference to overall emissions, because if we don't dig it up ourselves, as has already been pointed out, we'll be buying it from the same basin from the Norwegians. So it's just one of those things where it has become gesture politics to not allow this to go ahead. And it seems to me, in this particular limited context, it's cutting off your nose to spite your face. The more difficult decision, and I recommend everybody to watch Ed Conway's extended documentary on all this on Sky News. The more difficult decision is once these two go ahead, do you then say, as the Labour manifesto says, that's an end to it? Or do you go the way that Norway's going, which is just to develop everything that they think is left in the North Sea?
Quick final thoughts on this?
I just think it's really depressing. I understand I understand the arguments for it, but in terms of generating jobs, if there was a concerted effort to invest in jobs that didn't require fossil fuels, that jobs in renewable energy, is the problem with all of these policies is that they are short-sighted, that nobody has the boldness or courage to actually
This is a short-term thing, though. That's the point.
Yes, but if we keep thinking in a short-term way, this is we're never going to find a solution.
We're already in a transition. We're already paying more for our energy to pay for that transition. That's not going to change whether they go ahead with Rosebank or not.
OK, listen, we are going to take a break. When we come back, this is particularly depressing. Reckless behaviour that is causing carnage on Ireland's roads. We'll discuss that in a couple of minutes.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent. We've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. What you see a lot of here are military machines, soldiers, devastation and destruction. What you see very little of are the locals, the Gazans, the people who used to live here, the ghosts of this town. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered. You have the black flag, you have the yellow flag, people were kidnapped.
Inside this convoy, prisoners released by Israel in exchange for their hostages. The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists, but here the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. There were tears and there was defiance. This land has been farmed for hundreds of years, but now it's a scene of conflict. Israeli settlers have come to this area to seize land.
They've taken the land that I inherited from my father, and my father inherited from his father.
What would happen if you went over?
Oh, we'll be shot.
This is a place where the past is cherished, but the future is feared. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Sky News, get the full story first.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand, here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Tell us who you're looking for.
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shots rang out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcasts.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Hello again. Now, Ireland's Justice Minister has accused teenage joyriders of outrageously reckless behaviour, deliberately driving the wrong way down the motorway. 5 young people are dead and a 7-year-old boy is among 4 seriously injured in hospital.
I don't know what gets into the mind of people who are teenagers who decide that they should drive the wrong way down a motorway. Like, it is outrageously reckless, lethal, dangerous behaviour. And if just basic common sense should make you realise that you're putting yourselves at serious risk, let alone other users of motorways.
Well, Garda Commissioner Justin Kelly said what makes this reckless behaviour even more appalling is that in some cases it is being done for social media likes, regardless of the potentially devastating impact it might have on innocent people and themselves. I mean, it is unbelievable, Jenny, isn't it, that people would do this? And of course, the police are in a difficult position because they won't chase vehicles on the wrong side of the road because they'd be putting themselves in danger.
I mean, it is idiotic and unbelievably dangerous, and I think trying to get inside the mindset of people who are prepared to do this is very difficult. But, you know, this accident was completely tragic. I was looking at the coverage of it today where they were saying that when the police first came to the vehicle, they thought there were only 4 bodies in there, and it was only after quite some time that they realised that there was a fifth. Such was the state of the carnage. And so, you know, young people, they do stupid things. We don't know exactly what happened in this case, but we know that young people can do stupid things and they don't understand the long-term consequences of their actions. But you know, it is extraordinary if they're doing this for likes and traction on social media. Surely videos like this should be just banned immediately as soon as they're put up there. I mean, the platforms have something to answer for.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good point, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is the folly of youth. I mean, I got the impression that the minister there was saying that there is a sort of craze for this, for people doing it, which obviously is incredibly dangerous, and it's yet another legacy of digital communications. You know, we had the tragic cases of people dying because they were holding their breath for too long because there was online competition. Online only makes the folly of youth worse.
Folly of youth, as you say. Yeah, all right, really, really grim. Thank you both very much for the moment. We will be back in a few minutes' time. Don't go away.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Tonight on The Wrap, Russia issues a direct threat to the UK. The Kremlin brands the UK an accomplice in bloody crimes and warns of consequences after reports that Ukraine used British drones to strike Russia. Donald Trump threatens to bomb Oman, a friendly country, as the 60-day ceasefire with Iran runs out, raising fears of renewed fighting and disruption to global oil supplies. The Chancellor of Cambridge University criticises what he calls a racist feeding frenzy around Jason Arde, the former professor who died on Friday. Thousands of people turned out this evening for a vigil in Trafalgar Square. And FIFA sacks one of its most senior figures after he criticised Gianni Infantino's plan to put the World Cup up for sale. We discuss the day's biggest stories with the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the political commentator Adam Boulton. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's papers, doing that for you in half an hour. Hello there, a very good evening, and a good evening to Adam and Jenny. Nice to see you both this evening. Moscow has tonight threatened the UK with what it says are consequences after reports that British drones have been used to strike targets in the Russian mainland for the first time. It was reported over the weekend that the British drones had been used as part of Ukraine's campaign to strike targets deep inside Russia. Well, Kyiv has stepped up its attacks on Russia this year with long-range missiles and swarms of drones, increasingly targeting military sites, oil refineries and energy facilities. Well, this is the statement tonight from the Russian embassy to the UK. Reports that the Kyiv regime is using British drones to carry out strikes deep inside Russian territory confirm that London is deliberately opting for an escalation of the Ukraine crisis, while hypocritically professing a desire for peace. London's actions will inevitably carry consequences for which it will have to answer. The deeper its involvement in the conflict and the greater its support for Kyiv's terrorist machinery, the higher the price it will pay. Let's get the thoughts of Jenny and Adam. I guess no surprise this statement, really, Adam, from the Russian embassy.
Well, I'm surprised that they've chosen to take their cue from the front page report of the Sunday Times yesterday, which was showing that Britain's military contribution includes drones. And of course, we've seen recently this acceleration of very painful drone strikes in Russia. I would simply say that this suggests to me proof that it is really hurting Russia now, that this is going on, and this is a kind of vague threat saying there will be consequences. But Britain's position supporting Ukraine has been consistent ever since the invasion nearly 3.5 years ago, and B, it's pretty clear that Russia has been behaving in a hostile way towards the UK with the Litvinenko poisoning, the Skripal poisoning, we're told daily cyber attacks for a long time. They're already reciprocal sanctions. So this to me is huffing and puffing and showing pain.
Yeah, and we know that Ukraine is hitting targets deeper and deeper inside Russia, and the latest targets include wild berries, which is the equivalent of Amazon here in the UK. And I suppose as well as hitting military targets, you're also damaging the morale of the Russian people. It's hard to know, isn't it, how most Russians feel, but anecdotally, things certainly seem to be turning and people are getting more and more fed up.
I mean, this is the whole thing, that Putin was exploiting the weariness of the rest of the world when it came to the Ukraine war, the weariness of the American population, the weariness of Ukrainians, and hoping to just, in this war of attrition, chip away at Ukraine's resilience because everyone would get so ground down. And it seems that Ukraine is decided to beat them at their own game and targeting sites in Moscow, targeting infrastructure, targeting things that everyday Russians use. I mean, this question of whether or not us supplying drones constitutes deeper involvement is an interesting one, because obviously NATO countries have been providing ballistics and have been providing F-15s and all sorts of different weaponry for quite a long time. And I think Adam's right. The fact that there is so much bluster about all of this shows that it's working. It's really getting to them, and they're lashing out.
Yeah, and you know, Ukraine is still suffering all these years later, and those ballistic missiles come back and cause a huge amount of damage, don't they? And you know, Ukraine has resources that are limited when it comes to taking them out of the sky.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's a big issue about air defences, partly because the Americans in the Iran war have depleted their own reserves, and so they've become very reluctant to supply, for example, Patriot missiles. Trump at one stage said that he would allow the technology to be granted to Ukraine so Ukraine can make its own Patriot missiles, but since then America has rowed back on that. Ukraine is becoming more vulnerable, but it is decided that attack is the best way of protecting itself. And you know, it's important to say that although there have been casualties on the Russian side, Ukraine has only targeted strategic sites such as we were saying, warehouses and energy facilities, whereas the Russians quite clearly have been, you know, having terror attacks, having blitzes on civilians throughout, and have killed far more civilians on the Ukrainian side than have been killed on the Russian side, although it does appear that on the battlefield, the rate of attrition of Russian troops, and North Korean troops as well now, is much higher than the rate of attrition, bad as it is, for Ukrainian forces.
Fine. Yeah, and so it grinds on. OK, thank you for the moment. Well, let's move on to another superpower throwing its weight around. If it gets in the way, we'll bomb the S out of them. That was Donald Trump's blunt message to Oman in more industrial language than we're allowed to use on television, of course. The Gulf state has traditionally been seen as a US ally. Well, the US president's comments come as the 60-day ceasefire with Iran runs out. He said this evening that he is not looking to extend the memorandum of understanding with Iran and repeated his threat against Oman, albeit in more measured terms.
This morning you said you would bomb the S out of Oman if they got in the way of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Would you say you're out of patience with Oman, a strategic partner?
No, I don't think they behave very well, but we'd handle them very easily, just like we do others.
Just based on...
Well, our US correspondent James Matthews gave me his take a bit earlier on what's being said.
Oman is a long-time ally of the United States, strategic partner at a time when he needs all the friends he can get, particularly ones that can bring this or help him to bring it to some kind of suitable conclusion. I suspect his problem and frustration, fear certainly, would be that Oman and Iran, they are talking about solutions to the Strait of Hormuz. He will sense a carve-up that might potentially carve him out of any long-term deal, and that will trouble Donald Trump on a financial basis, but also clearly on a political basis too, at a time when there is no solution in sight. I was speaking to somebody, congressman today, happened to be a Democrat. He said the problem with Trump is that he has one plan. This art of the deal, it's all a nonsense. He's a guy who walks into a room, kicks the other guy in the balls, and if that guy doesn't back down, Donald Trump has nowhere to go. He says this is exactly the template of the Iranian issue. That's what is causing him the difficulty. The Iranians aren't backing down. So in terms of where it goes from here, Trump has no control over it, and that prompts the kind of frustration that he's been articulating today.
Adam and Jenny are here with me. Jenny, that's the word, isn't it? Frustration, yeah, which is clearly coming out in these comments.
And recognition of the total defeat of his policy in the Middle East. What a complete own goal this war in Iran has been, because all it has really done is sought to demonstrate to Iran how they can exploit the US's weaknesses via the Strait of Hormuz. And why should Iran back down? Why should Iran make any concessions when it now knows that it holds trump cards, if you excuse the pun? You know, the interesting thing about this, we know Donald Trump uses foul language. We know that Donald Trump insults his allies. He's done it with South Korea as well as Oman today. He's done it with all of his NATO allies as well. But what concerns me in all of this is just how also typically vague he is being here. Like when he says he's going to bomb the S out of Oman if it gets in the way of his plans for the Strait of Hormuz. What does that mean, getting in the way? Oman has a legitimate interest in sorting out what's going on there because it shares the Strait of Hormuz with Iran. So he's, it's just typical. He's unclear, he's using rude language, but he's completely frustrated because he is out of options, and this is at the same time as Netanyahu is refusing to listen to what the White House is calling for in terms of Gaza and calling for concessions and the ceasefire there. And he's got the midterms coming up in November. He has nothing left to throw at all of this, so he's just shouting.
We'll perhaps talk about the Gaza situation in a second, but how does he get out of this? I mean, he's really stuck.
Well, he is. I mean, I don't think bombing Oman would necessarily help things, bearing in mind it's only that there's a significant British military presence in Oman. I mean, I visited it with, I think, a couple of prime ministers. It's a very, important facilities both in the desert and on the sea. And really, Hillary Clinton, who, of course, former Secretary of State, top American diplomat, I mean, she's tweeted tonight, the president is making US policy friendlier to North Korea and Russia than to Canada and Oman. Are you kidding me? Well, sadly, we're not kidding Hillary Clinton or anyone else. Look, the only way he gets out of the Iran situation is to go home with his tail between his legs. And basically, the best he can get is the status quo ante, which is, freedom of passage through the Straits of Hormuz, with Iran now having a position to threaten. Similarly, probably the best he can get in Israel is the re-election of Benjamin Netanyahu, with whom he's fallen out with. So it's an absolute catastrophe on two fronts, but Trump is not the only person. He has many MAGA supporters who will insist that, it's all going brilliantly, and Trump is a genius who's rewriting the map of the world. So it doesn't necessarily mean there'll be a massive reversal of American policy, although, of course, people are anticipating that the midterms are going to be difficult for him.
Yeah, that story features on the front of the Metro. That doesn't sound much like peace, Mr. President, is their headline. Of course, we'll have a full rundown of what's in the rest of the papers at past for you. Let's move on. The Chancellor of Cambridge University, Lord Smith, has criticised what he calls a racist feeding frenzy around Jason Arde. The former professor died on Friday after a row over plagiarism. Thousands of people turned out this evening for a vigil in Trafalgar Square in central London. Barnaby Papadopoulos was with them.
They came together in their grief and in their anger.
The person in the middle of this awful storm.
Thousands of people gathered in London's Trafalgar Square to remember Professor Jason Arde, to mourn his passing and demand answers.
I used to teach Jason Arde, and he was a kind soul. It's appalling what's happened to him, and I feel if I don't do anything, then I'm supporting it.
I feel incredibly sad, and I can't do anything else because he was obviously a decent person, and he's been very badly treated.
The Cambridge University professor died last week at the age of 41. In the weeks before his death, he was subject to scrutiny over allegations that he'd fabricated parts of his personal life and plagiarised work. He denied the allegations and resigned shortly before his death, saying that his resignation should in no way be seen as an acceptance of the narrative that surrounded him. A statement by his family, read out by his local Labour MP, described the attention he'd received as a cruelty that had been too much to bear.
We are grateful to all who have created light in this dark time through kindness, generosity, and solidarity. Your presence here to remember him this evening means a lot to us. And while we cannot be there in person, please know that we stand with you in spirit. The public cruelty Jason was subjected to was too much for any man to bear.
Thousands have called for a public inquiry, adding their names to a petition which claims racism was at the heart of the treatment Professor Ardé received. Criticism has been levelled too at the University of Cambridge, with questions being asked about his appointment and the university's duty of care towards him. The university have previously defended their mental health support for Ardé. This had been described as a vigil and not a protest. But there was a lot of anger, much of it directed at the British media. That anger comes from those who don't just want to mourn, but to demand change too. Barnaby Papadopoulos, Sky News.
It's been a very difficult, sad story, this, hasn't it? What do you make of the comments from the Chancellor of the university? A racist feeding frenzy?
I think there was a vindictive glee in a lot of the commentary about Jason Ardé over 2 weeks. I think a lot of it was racist. There are people who will be delighted to find what they see as evidence of minorities, neurodivergent people, black people, particularly, I mean, it was his race that was the issue here as much as his neurodiversity, being what they consider to be over-promoted. This is being evidence of any minority person in a position of authority or who has won any claim to status that they don't deserve it. There are a lot of people who fall into that category. But I have to say, because this happened in August, when there wasn't a lot of other news around, and it was the sort of story that people enjoyed. They enjoyed the public shaming of somebody, and there was an appetite for the stories, not just in newspapers, but on social media. The algorithms were completely full of every new detail. And this isn't just, I mean, the other thing is, you know, Jason Ardé was not blameless. We talk about the plagiarism accusations, which were refuted by Liverpool John Moores, that awarded him his PhD. But it was about, he has a book coming out, where an autobiography that he has co-authored with somebody else, but it's the story of his life. He makes a lot of claims in it, which has invited people to look into claims that he's made about his charity work, about his sporting achievements, about the harassment that he's faced. Those claims have shown to be, in some cases, unsubstantiated, and it's legitimate to ask those questions. So this is a very complicated story that, you know, I said this before, but it's true. The fact that he died on Friday doesn't make this simpler. In fact, it makes it more complicated. This isn't simply a question of good and bad. Undoubtedly, Cambridge University have huge questions to ask about their recruitment process, their duty of care to Jason Ardé. There are also questions for his publisher, many questions that need to be asked. But ultimately, Jason Ardé was somebody who used whatever tools were at his disposal to suppress stories from the trade press, from the Times Educational Supplement, who brought up this question about these plagiarism allegations. He reported the journalist to the police, saying that it was damaging his mental health. He got very serious lawyers involved. So, you know, it's complicated. There's failures on all sides, and the real.
So is it? Sorry.
No. I just wanted to say that I think he was profoundly let down, Jason Ardé, and what he really needed was critical friends around him to point out his mistakes in a gentle way, so that it didn't get this far.
So it sounds well, certainly from what Jenny is saying, the scrutiny was fair, but maybe do you feel that after he resigned, certain media organisations, certain critics, certain commentators should have pulled back a bit? Do you think it went too far after that point?
I think with hindsight, people probably do feel like that, although I don't think anyone was trying to hound him to his death. I mean, that was not the intention, and therefore people, obviously, with such a tragic event, people see it retrospectively and think, did I get it right? But I don't think that was anyone's intention. It was a genuinely interesting story. He had in
the public interest?
Yeah, I think so. He had a significant position at Cambridge. He also was increasingly a media figure. And he was put out by Cambridge as the youngest black professor. They were very proud of doing that. And there were very legitimate questions raised. I mean, I know John Moores University said that he hadn't committed plagiarism. in a sense, they would say that, wouldn't they? Because they were the people who passed it. I mean, if you look at what he wrote and what other people wrote, it's difficult not to think that quite a lot was taken without attribution. Similarly, I think it's quite clear that some of his claims about his life story were untrue. You know, for example, saying that he featured in the 7 Up series.
Yeah, certainly exaggerated or embellished. Yeah.
Exaggerated, embellished. So he, you know, he was a fascinating character. He was a bit of a Walter Mitty or whatever, you know, whatever you want to call it. And therefore, I think the media displayed a legitimate interest. I think there were some, but a minority of people who broadened it out to a general criticism of blacks in academia or whatever. I don't think that was the intention of most people who wrote those stories, and they were very careful on it. And it's had a dreadful outcome, and everyone feels, you know, absolutely terrible about it. I mean, it does remind me of the David Kelly affair.
Yeah,
but
I had that thought.
But there is one difference in that, which is, in my view, the government of the time, the Blair, or people in the Blair government of the time, made David Kelly a national personality, and the pressure then came on him, and with tragic consequences. In the case of Jason Arday, he had already made himself. Yeah. So in that sense, it's not quite the same.
OK. All right, thank you both. We're going to take a break. When we come back, it's the red card for the FIFA executive who came out against Infantino in the World Cup sell-off row.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'll take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Hello again, welcome back to The Wrap. Now it looks like a red card with no VAR review. FIFA has sacked one of its most senior executives after he criticised Gianni Infantino's plan to sell off the World Cup. In a statement, a spokesman said the following: FIFA can confirm that the working relationship between FIFA and Kevin Lamore as FIFA's chief operating officer has ended on the 17th of August. FIFA thanks Kevin for his 2 years of service and wishes him the best of luck for the future. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris has more.
3 weeks into the crisis at FIFA, and the repercussions are still being felt from Gianni Infantino's secret attempts to sell shares in the World Cup to private investors. The world governing body now punishing a very public rebellion and criticism of Gianni Infantino's leadership by one of his closest aides. Sky News understands that Kevin Lamore, FIFA's chief operating officer, has been sacked for going public 2.5 weeks ago and being critical of what he called a deception by Infantino in secretly talking to the banks to try to sell off these shares to private equity. It was a very damning criticism at the time, where he said that the FIFA staff deserve better than contempt and intimidation. Now, FIFA are only saying that Lamore has left, but Sky News has obtained a letter sent to FIFA vice presidents and council members that talk about a parting of the way and say that this decision has been made after careful consideration and with great respect for Kevin, both personally and professionally. Lamore was the second FIFA insider to speak out. Sky News first revealed that Gianni Infantino's senior advisor, Carlos Cordero, had quit over what he called a bad deal for football over trying to sell off these shares. And the criticism has grown from within world football, a draining of confidence in Infantino's leadership. The latest on Monday saw the Scottish Football Association say they would not support Infantino in his re-election next year. And that is where things are focused on now. Infantino's attempt to stay in power and whether a challenger does emerge. That is certainly the aim from three of the key confederations, Europe, Asia and North America, who effectively called for Infantino to go, saying just last week in a joint statement that there'd been a breach of trust through deception. Deception, that word that keeps on coming up, the one used by Kevin Lamore, who has now been dismissed by FIFA for going public with his attack on Infantino, who remains president but embattled at FIFA.
Rob Harris reporting for us there. Adam, it's about 4 weeks now, I think, since this story sort of exploded onto the scene about the World Cup. Infantino's still in place. He did put out a statement sort of apologising and then saying, I don't want any more criticism.
Yeah, he put out one saying, will not tolerate any more criticism, I don't know.
If only we could all do that.
Yeah, I don't know how it could stop us, But look, the truth is, I just wonder, it says FIFA has sacked, and it sounds kind of official, doesn't it? I mean, who is FIFA? Was there a board decision on this? I suspect it's just Gianni Infantino that said, you don't fit. And my guess, and the people who follow this much more closely than me, all say this is going to drag on until spring of next year, when there's an election on whether Infantino should be re-elected. And frankly, if the national and regional governing bodies of football get their stuff together, they should put up another candidate and Infantino will be out in his ear.
I just think FIFA under Infantino is just like the mafia, sort of trying to sell off pockets of it to his mates and cozying up to Donald Trump. And this is just another iteration of that, isn't it? Somebody has displeased the boss, good luck with your future endeavours. There's a little hint of menace in that message there.
There'll be a movie made out of it, won't there, one day?
Yes, I wonder who will play Infantino.
OK. Let's take a look then, shall we, at what is making the front pages of tomorrow's papers, starting with the Metro, following Donald Trump's expletive-laden threat to bomb Oman, a US ally. The Metro declares, that doesn't sound much like peace, Mr President. Here's your Guardian for tomorrow, reporting that Reform UK's Deputy Leader Richard Tice has been criticised for suggesting that people should get more accustomed to enjoying extreme heat rather than worrying about its effects on climate change. The Mirror picks up on that story as well, in particular Mr Tice's comments about how the heat could be good for Britain's sparkling wine market. According to the Eye, fire chiefs have warned the public not to ring 999 to report neighbours having barbecues or bonfires because it could overwhelm the system. Here's your Express, claiming that migrant camps like those seen in Calais could soon be established on Britain's south coast. While the Times reports that British children are becoming intoxicated with extremism through the content they're being exposed to on social media. The Telegraph says Housing Secretary Angela Rayner is softening planning rules for traveller sites, meaning councils will have fewer ways to block them. The FT says the accounting firms KPMG and EY have been awarded a contract worth nearly £500 million to train civil servants. Andy Burnham is the subject of mockery in The Star as it's emerged. He briefly exchanged messages with a prankster claiming to be Donald Trump's chief of staff, while the Daily Mail demands to know the identity of the culprit. And The Sun has a story concerning former Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola's divorce. Let's have a look at some of those stories then in a bit more detail, starting with the Eye. Neighbours told don't phone 999 to report next door's barbecue. I have to admit, we've got a hosepipe ban where we are, and I'm not using my hosepipe, but I've been filling the watering can with the hosepipe, and obviously...
I think that counts.
Does that count?
We have to dob you in.
It makes the noise, and I'm like
on
paranoid that the neighbours will hear the hosepipe as I'm filling the watering can and dob me in.
I'm just a bit worried that people have these hostile relations with their neighbours, that everybody's reporting each other to the police for hose pipes and barbecues and God knows what else. I have some very nice neighbours who, in fact, came over to water my plants while I was on holiday with a watering can.
Yeah, good. Has it all got a bit over the top? I mean, was this alert that went out sensible, or is it panicked people? What do you think
you need to use alerts like this judiciously to warn people of an imminent threat. It is not a public information service. It shouldn't be used that way. It devalues the entire thing. You need it to be that when you get an alert like that, it means really that you need to take notice of something imminently. So it's concerning that the first kind of proper use of this alert, you know, we've had tests before, but the first proper use was for this. Of course, the government says it was at the request of the fire service, but, you know, they should have used their judgment in all of this. But things are really serious. I was on holiday. When my plane was coming into land, I had a look at our green and pleasant land in England, and it is not green. It looks like a parched prairie all over everywhere.
Yeah, it is incredible, isn't it?
It is absolutely extraordinary, except for the parts of our country where there have been water leaks from the water companies failing to do their maintenance, and those bits are very green. I've, you know, some friends of mine were posting some pictures of and thanking their water companies for allowing their local parks to be so green.
We've got a leak, and I'm going to have to get the mower out because it's.
What inside the Metro, Adam? Sort of, you know, on a fairly similar theme. Water limits could be on the way. This is because at the moment businesses can use water, can't they? Like car washes, gyms, sports pitches, and the like. Even private pools are OK, but they could face strict restrictions on water use. Is that a sensible idea? Is it inevitable?
Well, it is only if you've got a poor water service. I mean, we are a wet island. We should not be having water shortages, is the truth. And we certainly shouldn't be having water shortages when the government is going all out to build data centres, which are going to consume vast amounts of water. And that's all become an issue in America. I mean, I think that the situation is that provisional powers have already been granted for water authorities to go further than hosepipe bans and declare a state of drought, at which point theoretically you're not supposed to be using water in cans or washing your car or taking water for private swimming pools. But all of this depends on smart metering and smart monitoring. And as with everything else, our water system is pretty decrepit. There isn't, and it's probably a good thing, there isn't universal smart metering of water. My feeling with all this, a bit like the messages, is that the administration of the water industry has been so bad, so corrupt, so much money has been taken out being invested that the chances of the public willingly complying with these sort of things are pretty low.
That's the problem, isn't it? Yeah. Heavy showers predicted to hit the UK on Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, the most interesting thing in the eye story, incidentally, is the Met predicts there's a chance of a new heat wave by mid-September, although some places in the UK, nighttime temperatures will apparently drop as low as 3 degrees.
That's crazy, 3 degrees, goodness me. It all leads nicely on to the next story. On the front of The Guardian, Reform's Deputy Richard Tice saying we should stop fighting climate change, enjoy the heat wave, make the most of the sun.
On the hottest day ever recorded in this country, when it was 40 degrees, I was on television with Richard Tice, who was not yet an MP, and I was saying that I actually found it frightening that it was that hot. It was so unbearably hot. This was a few years ago. It was like in 2022. And he was just saying, you're frightened, kind of mocking me and saying it's going to be wonderful for the tourist economy, enjoy it, it's great. That's why we go on holiday, is to have temperatures like this. It's just such a load of rot. It's so disingenuous. This country is not built for this heat. The houses we live in are not built for this heat. If you go to the Mediterranean, if you go to hot countries, the houses are built in a completely different way and people know how to behave in terms of shutting their windows and their shutters during the day. It would involve an enormous culture change. Enjoying the heat waves might be all right for some, but there are lots of people for whom it's incredibly unpleasant. Older people, people who cannot sleep in the heat, people living in social housing where it gets incredibly hot in high-rise buildings. It is not possible to simply enjoy the heat unless you're already living a particular kind of lifestyle. So it's a ridiculous thing to say.
Well, I mean, front of the mirror apparently spends time in Dubai, so he's probably used to front of
the mirror, same thing, isn't it? He's talking about English wine and sparkling wine is benefiting from the heat. We should enjoy it.
Well, the point that he's making is that we should just enjoy it is wrong, because the health authorities are saying that thousands more people are dying because of the heat. For some workers, an interesting article on The Guardian by John Harris yesterday talking about transport workers, are talking about strike and the temperature in there, in cabs and things. So that, it's a serious issue for some people, if not Richard Tice. Now, as far as the sparkling wine is concerned, I spend a lot of time in Sussex, which is sparkling wine country. There's no doubt that it is getting very high quality because it's got the same terroir as champagne. It is also true that as temperatures have gone up, Champagne has had a bad year for harvest of grapes this year because it's been too hot and too dry. And yes, just across the channel, Sussex has benefited from this, as has Kent. So he may be onto something.
They win all the awards now, don't they? We're doing well.
Oh, yeah, it's very good. The sparkling wine is good, but what people always attack me for is saying that English still wine is rubbish. And, France has rather more to offer.
We will have sparkling wine benefits on one side, tropical diseases on the other coming our way. This is not a win-win situation in any respects. No. And, the flies that are buzzing around.
Oh, the flies.
I've been bitten to pieces by insects.
I'm glad it's not just... I thought maybe it was a problem with our kitchen hygiene.
No.
It's also not true that all the vineyards have been able to cash in on this because there was a late frost in the wine-growing areas of England, and some people weren't adequately prepared, and so that killed off the grapes.
What granular knowledge you have about the wine industry in England.
On that note, we will head to a break. We're going to discuss more of the biggest and best stories from tomorrow's papers in a couple of minutes.
jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hello again, welcome back. We are looking at Tuesday's front pages, including the front of the Daily Star. He's just 4 weeks into his new job, but Andy's faked. Be careful how you say that, I think.
I don't quite get
Well, I think it's a play on words. We don't need to go into it, Adam. Just tell us about this story then. It's a fake phone call, isn't it? A prank call.
Well, it's not a call, it's messaging.
Messaging, yeah.
He thought he was being messaged by the Chief of Staff of Donald Trump, Susie Wiles. They exchanged apparently some pleasantries. Then he realised that it was a bit rum. He reported it. The White House say it's nothing to do with us. And he's not the first politician to have been caught out by comedians or pranksters managing to get through. I know that John Culshaw got through pretending to be William Hague to Tony Blair. I seem to remember there were several pranks on presidents that have been conducted. And also Rory Bremner, the impersonator, did a few successful prank calls as well. I am told Rory Bremner will be here tomorrow. So
yes, he will.
He will be able to fill you in on,
talk more about it.
On prank calls.
Front page of the Daily Mail as well. This story's obviously got traction. So who was White House hoaxer who duped PM?
That's a legitimate question. Was it somebody who's a comedian doing it for fun? Was it a hostile foreign state?
The Russians.
Yeah, it could have been the Russians. Was Andy Burnham's phone compromised? How did they get his number? It's extremely embarrassing for number 10, because even if nothing of consequence was said in this exchange of messages, it shows that it is possible for people to have a direct line to our Prime Minister. And we don't know how long these exchanges were going on for. So it's worrying. It's not unusual, but it's worrying. It happens to a lot of leaders, and it's just something you have to be on the lookout for.
It's a really good point. Let's talk about Princess Eugenie, because she's revealed the name of her baby daughter, born on August the 3rd. There it is, cute little picture of Adelaide Elizabeth Annina Brooksbank, the latest member of the royal family. Writing on social media, Princess Eugenie said she had named her daughter in tribute to 3 people we love and admire, past and present, and to reflect both English and Portuguese history. Posh people always have funny names for their babies, don't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is going to be 15th in line to the throne, this child. You'd be interested to know. And Elizabeth is after the Queen, and of course we've already had Prince Harry calling his daughter Lilibet after that. Annina is apparently a person, but we're not being told who she is. The one I find interesting is Adelaide, because the story is that it's been named after Queen Adelaide, who lived in the early 19th century, who was married to King William IV. Now, why on earth you'd want to pay tribute to her, I don't know. I simply point out that quite often people name their daughter or their son after the place where they believe they were conceived, like Brooklyn Beckham. So I don't know whether Eugenie's been to Australia recently.
Well, my daughter's middle name is Lavender because we lived in Lavender Bay, so maybe there's some truth to
Florence
that.
Nightingale, another one,
I would say that if you're a kind of slightly outcast member of the royal family, the path seems to be just name your child after the Queen. Put their middle name in there and that will smooth things over.
I mean, the interesting thing is also whether this child will be a Royal Highness. Because Prince Andrew, or what was Prince Andrew, he did call his children princesses and royal highnesses, unlike Princess Anne, who didn't, for example. And I don't know whether you pass it on down to the next generation.
I doubt it.
Will she actually be Princess Adelaide?
Gosh, lots to think about. Thank you both very much. Great to see you tonight. Nice having you along. We've got the sport for you next, including drama in the Welsh Derby, the first between Wrexham and Cardiff in over 2 decades.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent. We've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. What you see a lot of here are military machines, soldiers, devastation and destruction. What you see very little of are the locals, the Gazans, the people who used to live here, the ghosts of this town. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered. You have the black flag, you have the yellow flag, people were kidnapped.
Inside this convoy, prisoners released by Israel in exchange for their hostages. The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists, but here the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. There were tears and there was defiance. This land has been farmed for hundreds of years, but now it's a scene of conflict. Israeli settlers have come to this area to seize land.
They've taken the land that I inherited from my father, and my father inherited from his father.
What would happen if you entered it?
Oh, we'll be shot.
This is a place where the past is cherished, but the future is feared. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Sky News, get the full story first.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand,
Wow.
here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK.
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shots rang out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcasts.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
Hello again, let's get the sport. Here's Mike.
Juan de Ramos, knowing he may not have Dimitar Berbatov signed up after this season.
The reality is this, that Berbatov is with us at the moment and we're going to enjoy having him with us. If he goes, then we'll have to look for a replacement for him.
Coming from a small country, I knew that it was my moment to grab it. Otherwise, maybe another one was not going to come my way.
Fantastic talent. I think in the club there was already rumors that Beba maybe it's coming.
We know because Ferguson always give us the tips and asking also guys, I'm going to take this player, what do you think? He always like to have your opinion.
It was not under the radar or anything like that. It was played out in the headlines where everybody knew what was happening. It was always difficult doing business with Spurs, as we know.
In my mind, it was straightforward. A team wants you, they come, they give the money that the other team wants for you, you sign the contract, there we go. Fortunately, that was not the case with me.
Well, we've made a bid for one player, and obviously that would be enhances a great deal.
Sir Alex Ferguson arrived in South Africa as part of Manchester United's pre-season, but events at home have become more pressing. Tottenham have reported them to the Premier League for tapping up Dimitar Berbatov, saying that the player has made it clear he wants to join Manchester United and will now be a negative influence on the squad.
Tottenham have written to the Premier League to ask them to investigate our actions. Spurs are choosing to cover it in the press as well, that's their prerogative, but we'll deal with it privately, we'll deal with any request for information from the Premier League, and let's see what happens. But I think it'd be totally inappropriate to make any public comment on that matter. It's a very competitive sport, football, and the transfer business is very competitive, so you have to go down there, you have to have thick skin and just get on with it. I didn't feel that we'd done anything that was untoward, really, or not best practice. I would have kept Daniel informed exactly where we were at, what was happening, and what our thinking was. I have notes of all my conversations and calls with him, so I could, that would be a record there.
I think when you're dealing with Daniel Levy and Tottenham, he did what was best for Tottenham. We won't let people walk all over him just because Manchester United came in and said, right, we want Dimitar Berbatov. It was always going to be difficult.
I think Daniel Levy at that time was proving to be a hard negotiator, and I think at times quite frustrating for someone like Sir Alex to deal with.
Did you speak to Daniel Levy? I make it clear that now is the next step in my development. I need to go to make it happen for me. So he knew, we spoke, sometimes it was more calm, sometimes it was more voices raised. When you are new in a negotiation like this, like I was thinking, what is going on here? I mean, where am I? Do I need now to be more vocal and strong in my position? Do I need to relax and let my agent do the talking and stuff like this? It was fascinating.
Let's head towards midnight with a look at the weather forecast.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
So it is going to turn cooler this week with showery outbreaks for most parts, some heavy with hail and thunder. There'll be a mainly warm, breezy and rather cloudy start tomorrow with prolonged rain in the far north and a scattering of showers elsewhere, concentrated in the west. Now, southern Britain will see showers fading through tomorrow morning, becoming mainly dry and sunny. Northeastern parts look largely fine as well, but the northwest can expect further showers, while the far north will keep some more general rain. Shetland looks fine for once. Temperatures will be similar to today's, but with quite a stiff breeze. Those are the temperatures at midday tomorrow. The afternoon will bring little change, although many southern parts will turn cloudier, while Ireland will see showers becoming more widespread. Let's take a look at the picture for Wednesday. It's going to bring sunny spells, some showers as well. Those showers will be concentrated over Ireland and the northern UK, where some will be heavy with a risk of hail and thunder, but look fairly isolated over southern Britain. It's going to be a bit cooler in the south, breezy for most. And on to Thursday, it's looking showery once again, with the showers concentrated mainly in the south and southeast.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
That was the wrap. Thank you very much for watching. All the top stories coming up right here on Sky News at midnight.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.